So, did we all enjoy and appreciate last Wednesday's Tinto talks? I know I certainly did. I definitely gonna put it out there as saying one of the more surprising dev diaries that we have had so far. Obviously, is the 28th dev diary that we have had, which is kind of wild. This thing's been going on for half a year now, over half a year, which is awesome. And definitely, I think this is the most shocking dev diary thus far. Because, of course, we can look at things like the population system, we can look at things like the building system, which are really radical departures from EU4 specifically. But at the back of everyone's mind, we all kind of expected that, mana was dying, that development was dying, that population was going to be a thing. Everyone kind of understood that, or imagined, they guessed, they predicted, let's say, that the building system would be deepened. Obviously, if you have a population, then you can have a population that works in buildings. Fantastic. But I don't think I am wrong in saying that no one was really expecting the ability to traverse frozen lakes and frozen seas, and I don't think anyone really predicted that level of influence that the weather would have. And it's funny, I did message Johan on Discord after I made the video saying, how wild it is, and I wasn't expecting this. Apparently, that was in EU2. that was apparently a feature in EU2 that you could walk over seas that had frozen. And I never even played EU3. It was before my time playing Paradox games. So if any of you guys are, the golden oldies and you can remember EU2, what was your experience playing it? I would very much be interested in seeing that. This here is the Europa Universalis 2 wiki. I believe I may be the first person to hop onto this wiki in the past 20 years. I don't know. But you can see here, there's not much information on it. I guess really old wiki, really old game. But it says here, and I know it's cutting off the start of it. Maybe I can fix that right here. Sea zones are relatively uncomplicated. They only vary in that some are coastal and some not, and some may occasionally get ice or storms. I can't actually find anything about, armies being able to march over them or have battles on them. But apparently that is a thing that, I was completely ignorant of, but, let me know if you played EU2. I'll be interested. But anyway, I will move on and look at the comments of the dev diary, and we'll see if there are things that have been interesting, that have some more gleaning of information. There is only a couple of pages this time. I think Johan has been a bit busy. I think he was in Sweden for a little bit, but there's only a couple of pages of responses here, so we're just going to go through and see what we've got here. Will it be Arctic? There'll be Arctic sea zones. They're always frozen over and theoretically traversable by armies. No, I think this is really, they're looking at the far north of Canada, right? And seeing if, can we just have this be seas and they're all permanently frozen over? I would argue that if you have an area of land that is purely water and it is permanently frozen, you might as well just call it land at that point. I don't really see a reason to pretend that it is, a sea at that point, right? Are there some sort of upgrades for troops to survive in the winter, or at least make, for an example, the Russian armies have better odds at surviving the winter than, say, some French armies that found their way to Russia for some weird reason? Not from the winter, but lacking supplies in winter is far more devastating. I think this is going to be very impactful in the way that perhaps, potentially, we may end up with a situation where, how when you have an army and they need to be supplied not only with food, but also with goods, right? Your cavalry will need a consistent supply of horses. Your infantry, late game, will need a consistent supply of firearms and gunpowder and all of these different things. I think it would be very, very cool if these armies, if they were in a winter province, or a province that is suffering from some version of winter, mild, severe, I forget the third one. I think it would be very cool if fur would become a required good in that situation. So if you don't have that, then you suffer massive, massive attrition. Uh, Invading Russia in the winter can be done. It was done. The fucking Mongols are proof of that. Um, Invading without the proper gear, invading without proper winter clothing, less successful, historically speaking. Invading somewhere that gets very, very cold without the proper gear to survive said very, very cold, historically terrible idea. Though I would argue that the Russian armies are also equally bad at this. The aforementioned, not aforementioned, I didn't mention it before, the appropriately mentioned Winter War, very good example of that. Russians also pretty fucking terrible at surviving winter. But, you know, equip your troops properly and then you'll be fine. I think that'd be really cool. Having that temporary goods requirement, I think would be awesome. Because then it would make sense because these countries that have much of the fur, right? Because that is one of the RGOs that you'll find very frequently in the north. I know we saw Finland and Russia had quite a lot of furs. I think, you know, we'll be able to get that accurately simulated without having some silly little extra mechanic just for this thing. It'll be, you know, organically simulated, which I think would be really, really cool. But anyway, moving on. I wish it wasn't winter reducing food production, rather than being specific harvest times within the year. The massive food production and then almost nothing at other times should impact the pattern of military campaigns. So yeah, that is the thing, right? Food isn't just harvested. Oh, it's like, oh, I'll take you know, one stalk of grain here and another stalk the next day and another stalk the next day, right? They grow and you get nothing from it while it's growing, and then you harvest it all at once and you get a massive influx of food, and then you have to store it. That is technically how it should be, but that is not how it is going to be because of performance calculations and different food have different seasons, which if you wanted to simulate all of that, then it would be calculation heavy. I am fine with it being abstracted into, you know, a certain amount of food being given every month, and then in the winter that, you know, obviously reduces massively. I'm perfectly fine with that abstraction. Maybe some kind of mod, I'm looking at you, Mayo and Texas, will be able to pretty easily, I would imagine, make it so that absolutely zero food gets created during the majority of the time, and then you get a huge, huge influx of food at a very specific time. And, you know, that would also work pretty well, I think. I don't think it's necessary for the main game, but certainly for a mod it could be cool. But the game would allow for that by having, oh, I don't know, some kind of building that facilitates the storage of food. And that brings us neatly to the Saturday building, which is the granary. It increases food capacity by 500. I feel like this is perfectly fine, right? This would solve the issue. Also, that's very loud. You have a huge amount of food incoming at very one specific point. You get that, you know, fill up all those granaries, and then over time that will, you know, slowly drain as it gets eaten. Maybe you could have some events related to, you know, theft or blight or something going on in the granaries. It could be cool. It could be cool. But I definitely think that is better left to mods. Granaries have various production methods based on what they are growing. Potatoes and maize. Actually, we can have a look at, I believe there is an archive thing for it. Reference materials from map post. Is this one? No, I will look for it. Here it is, and I will put a link to this in the description below. This is made by Basically, all of the goods that we have seen and we know, and sharing those. We have, yes, maize there. We have wheat, potatoes. What else was in there? Wheat is there again. But yes, basically, just sharing with you that we have this one as well. What's that? Sugarcane, potentially. If I can see that real quick. Unless this needs to be updated because it is no longer there. Okay, yes, it is sugar. It is sugar. I'm just gonna have this to the side if I need to look at it again. But yeah, basically a bunch of different goods there that can be held in the granary. This one here is sturdy grains, by the way. But yeah, I think granary, obviously it was a building that was expected to be seen. Makes sense for it to be there. Moving on, though. We got EU5 before the Winds of Winter. Yeah, we've been waiting for that book for a very long time. And most recently, I think George R. Martin blamed the times for it, including the rise of fascism is something that he blamed for the lack of Winds of Winter, which is an interesting an interesting reason to not have created a book, but whatever. Can we get monsoons as well? Maybe even a random hurricane. They have some plans for storms. And if you have played Imperator Rome, you will be somewhat familiar with the various types of storms that you can experience in that game. And I went and I pulled up the dev diary where this was implemented on the 10th of June, 2019, I think. But essentially, this is what a sea storm would look like, and if you had your navy in this location, on this sea province, sea tile, it would take some attrition. It would be over a bunch of different locations, this obviously in the Ionian Sea, or the Aegean Sea, my apologies. Yeah, you would have storms like that. But they weren't the only kinds of storms. Of course, you had these desert storms as well, which would massively affect the attrition rate that you would suffer if you had an army marching through the desert. Similarly with winter storms. They all looked really, really cool, and I would definitely like to see those make an appearance again in EU5. They also had volcanoes, which I'm not sure if they're going to add them as they were in Imperata, but let's be honest, they kind of looked really cool when they erupted. So I would not be against seeing volcanoes in for sure. But anyway, monsoons, yes, hopefully we'll get those. If two hostile armies meet in a frozen sea dome, do they fight as normal? Is there a greater chance of the ice breaking? It is just a normal fight. Will winter affect siege progress? Winter is more likely to make sieges fail as your army may dwindle. You know, we're going to be taking attrition on our army regardless of whether it is winter, regardless of whether we have food or not. If we're taking more attrition due to it being winter, then yeah, having sieges fail is going to be something I think we're going to get very frustrated about. I am also very much fine with it. I think it is a bit more historically authentic for us to get frustrated over sieges taking too long rather than just having a CK3 bar fill up. Guys here saying cries in Danish because one of the examples that we know of from history of an army crossing over the ice is the Swedish army. I think I initially thought they'd marched from Skåne to I forget what the island, Sjælland. But apparently that's not true. They were marching back from Jutland and marched their way to Skåne. I think they burned Copenhagen on the way. I don't know. I might need to look into that again. What do you base winter severity? Minimum temperature during winter, length of winter. Basically, climate has a maximum winter level. So if you have an arid climate, you will be suffering a maximum of X winter level. If your climate is, alpine, I think they called it Arctic in that one actually, not alpine. But either way, continental will be able to suffer X amount of winter. Mediterranean will suffer X amount of winter, but they all having maximum winter levels makes sense. One of the things that people were a little bit worried about is the English Channel. Historically, during this period, obviously, if we go historically, then we can go back to the height of the Ice Age. Doggerland still existing, kind of historical, but the English Channel has never frozen over. It has never been possible to march an army from Calais to Dover. Never been possible. But people were worried that with this system, that might be possible, because in the dev diary it was said that narrows and inland seas and lakes could all freeze over, and the sea tile from Calais to Dover is Narrows Sea, right? So potentially it could freeze over. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, because again, it literally never happened. And while I'm fine with having ahistorical things happen, they need to be in moderation, and a geological event that has never occurred before, I think, is a little bit beyond the pale on that one. What about the opposite for certain regions where the summer is too hot? And this is something that was a little bit controversial. You can still work during the night and in the shade, so there isn't going to be a situation where construction is halted due to a heat wave, for example. In the winter, if the ground is frozen solid and the materials get snowed and iced in, then the nighttime isn't going to help. The daytime isn't going to help. But in the height of summer, yeah, you can still work during the night, and even the hottest places get very, very cold at the nighttime, like the Sahara Desert, very, very cold at night. So definitely, I think this is something that is disappointing some people. I'm mostly fine with it, though I think there should be some kind of debuff for heat waves, some kind of production malice, some kind of something that will affect your armies if it is too hot. Definitely would be welcome there, I think. Will the Little Ice Age be portrayed? They're still talking about how they want it to be simulated. So the Little Ice Age, for those who don't know, is a period that began in the 1300s. So some scientists say it started in the 1200s. It's a start date has not been nailed down. But basically, it was a period of time where the temperature was really quite cold on average over much of Europe. It was especially pronounced in around 1430 to about 1460. It was, the summers were short. Growing food was difficult, and there was a lot of famine going around because of it. But yeah, they're still looking at how they want it to be simulated. I would definitely want the Little Ice Age to be in there somewhere, because I can't remember where I saw it. I believe it was like a Historia Civilis or a Lindy Beige video that essentially drew a line from these cold periods, essentially fermenting decades down the line rebellions. I think the one that was mentioned, it wasn't the Little Ice Age, but I can imagine this would happen as well, was there was a year without a summer in 1812-ish. I don't remember exactly the date, but that was basically caused by a volcano erupting in Indonesia, and the knock-on effects of that were theorized to be, the 1848 revolutions all across Europe. And I found that link being very, very interesting. Whether it was, it is just a theory at the end of the day, and it wasn't, provable, the direct cause and effect. But I think having these, this Little Ice Age and the knock-on effects of it would be very interesting to see. What happens when a navy is stuck on ice and an army moves into the tile? Like when the French troops capture the Dutch ships at Den Helder. That is the intent. They're not sure it's in yet, but they want armies to screw over your navies if your navy is stupid enough to be caught in the ice. Awesome. That's so cool. That is really bloody cool. It's, again, something I was not expecting, but I would be perfectly happy to see it be a thing. Does army attrition in winter differ if soldiers are on the move or in a siege compared to them just being in a barracks? Partially, but it's still not good. I mean, the partially here could be because the guy's adding two different things, right? Soldiers on the move, we don't know if they suffer more attrition. We know that they lose morale as they move on an hourly tick. But we do know if you are taking part in a siege, you are taking much attrition, and that is definitely different to you just standing around in your land in a barracks, right? So yes, it is different. Maybe don't add two different things to compare to in the future. You might get a better answer. Will the other 3 seasons have an impact? No, not really. Do sea zones being able to freeze over mean that the code would allow dynamic map changes to have succeeded, or is this a separate thing? This is, unfortunately, a separate thing. I mean, I say unfortunately, but more so I am just... I'm hoping that we get that, what I think is an engine upgrade, an engine refresh, that kind of thing that will allow us to chop down forests. Would be very cool. I want that a lot. Though, on the topic of that, this is a comic that was made by Father Loris. What would you like out of Project Caesar? Just an engine upgrade, nothing crazy. And then when we got the armies marching over ice, this Tinto talk, this is brilliant. And I bring this up because we have here Mathieu Roper. I pronounce that terribly, and I apologize for that. He goes by The French Paradox on the Paradox forums, and you may have seen him on EU4 dev clashes and such. But basically he's saying here, now I'm really curious what people expect an engine update in our games would do. I responded to this by saying, for Project Caesar, the ability, nice spelling mistake there, to change the location's vegetation during a game, deforestation, or draining a wetland, or making a farmland out of a grassland, or even more radically, reclaiming land from the sea in the low country. His response here, I guess we need to do a talk about what the Clausewitz does and doesn't do one day, because none of that is caused by the engine and is up to every game to implement or not. And that surprised me, because I've always been under the impression that the reason we can't change a forest or a woods into farmland, grassland, whatever, in EU4 was because the engine wouldn't allow it. And that's just always been the understanding that I and the modders that I've spoken to have always been under that impression. And I assumed that is something that came straight from the developers. And I guess that would be something I would love to get clarification on. What is it about EU4 that prevents me from changing in-game a grassland into a farmland, or a forest into a wood, or a wood into a grassland, etc.? What is it in-game that is preventing that? Because I always thought it was Clausewitz. I always thought it was just something that was not... the engine was not capable of providing the ability to do that. But if I'm wrong, then, just let me know, because I would definitely appreciate that knowledge. It sounds absolutely amazing. How's the AI handling it so far? Not being able to move through places sometimes, getting its army swallowed by the cracking ice. So Johan, I mean, obviously he's probably played quite a bit of this game in his own testing. And he's not noticed any armies killed by the melting ice yet. So it's really, really rare. I think, especially in multiplayer, I think it's going to be a source of absolute glee if you notice your opponent's army sinking. I mean, it's horrific to think about because there's thousands of men drowning, but I think it's going to be so fucking funny if we have that in multiplayer. Most important question, will we be able to see autumn on the map? It's been gone since Hoi 4 and it looked very pretty. Basically, the world-changing color with the seasons. So, the snow comes, everything turns white. Then the spring comes, everything turns green. And then the autumn comes, and everything turns yellow, orange, brown. That would be really cool. I would love to see that. And, yeah, so would Johan here, it seems. Does the game have RNG'd or regional continental winters, or is it calculated randomly per province? They spread. So if you have a location that has a winter modifier, then that winter modifier can spread to the next location. I don't think it's going to just spontaneously appear, although maybe it probably could as well. And does it have a scripted or historical winter like in 1657, 1658? I don't know what happened then, but this could be one of the ones that I was talking about before. There are no scripted special winters. Yeah, bro, but the Little Ice Age. I feel like having the Little Ice Age. It's worth having a scripted winter. It is worth it, in my opinion. Will the time when a location enters and exits the specific degree of winter, is it predetermined, or is it somewhat randomized? And some winters will be longer and shorter than others. So they're somewhat random. Makes sense. Will mountain forts be garrisoned or siegeable during winters? They will be siegeable, but you're probably not going to have a good time with it. This also makes me think, are sieges going to be somewhat shorter than in EU4? Because especially sieging a mountain fort, because they get higher defensiveness for being a mountain fort. Those sieges regularly, almost inevitably, took multiple years. What is going to be the situation in EU5 where we want to siege mountain fort? Because he's saying here it's not a good idea, but sometimes it has to be done, especially before we get, that horrible invention where I can bypass forts. You're going to have to siege a mountain fort at some point. So how is that going to be done? Are we going to be expecting sieges to take, 6 months? Are we going to time our sieges specifically to start just as the snow thaws? I'd be interested in knowing that. Will the player or AI pathing try to avoid routes that take winter attrition, especially for shattered retreats? It'd be annoying if my retreating army took a shortcut through Hoth and died on the way home. Maybe not. Unfortunate maybe, but it's actually hilarious, or it's absolutely hilarious if it happens to your opponent in a multiplayer game. Yeah, that for sure. I'm awaiting many laughs seeing my enemies die to snow. What about hurricane and monsoon season? That'll be another month. Whether he's talking about another month of the year in the game, or whether he's talking about in a month we will get some information on how those apply. We'll get a dev diary in a month about that. I don't know. Narrows freezing is an awesome feature, but does it end instantly, or do you have any indicators that it's beginning to thaw? Graphically, in the terrain map mode, you can see the ice change over time. That's cool. That's really cool. Very much looking forward to seeing terrain. I hopefully we're gonna get some visuals from it soon, because while I love Tinto maps and I think the maps look good, I'm very much warming to this watercolory kind of aesthetic. I really want to see some terrain, man, because let's just go back and look at Imperator a second. This looks fucking gorgeous. This looks absolutely fucking beautiful. And while this isn't the map mode I like to play in, I like the one where all of this is blue rather than just the edges. It looks great, and I really want to see this. I want to see the mountains. I want to see the grass, the hills, the trees. I want to see all that in EU5 soon. And again, we know that EU5's code base for the map is based on Imperator. It's an evolution of Imperator, not an evolution of EU4 or Vicky or Hoy or whatever. It should look great, and I really need to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it so bad. Will a frozen sea zone also impact control and trade propagation through a sea zone? Yes. The travel time for trade is worse, and the control proximity propagation is far worse as well. All right, this scares me, right? This essentially means that if you are at war with a country that has land in the north, if you're at war with somebody who has land that will be affected by winter, you will want to peace out with this country during the winter when they are suffering from frozen water, control problems, etc. Because we know already that it is cheaper and easier to take a location in a peace deal if the control is low. We learned that when talking about the Portugal having Goa with super low control. Very easy for the Indian countries to take that territory from Portugal because the control was super low. So this is somewhat worrying. The idea that it might be beneficial for you. It would be cheaper for you to take a location if you take it when it's all covered in snow. I'm just saying that could be a strategy. Perhaps this is more for the next dev diary, but will roads allow for passing through mountains in the winter? Looking at the current Italy terrain map, this would result in Italy being entirely inaccessible to France for certain parts of the year. I mean, sure, why not? How is overland trade affected by season? Trade is less affected. But I do think having roads would probably, or maybe could, allow for a little bit. I mean, I guess it does, because if you have a road, your armies will probably march faster, simply due to the fact that there is a road. So yeah, you probably will be less affected by snow storms in the mountains. Although I guess one thing he's mentioning there, of course, is armies will not move if a mountain has a winter, right? It completely blocks movement. So yeah, maybe I don't know, because sure, Italy would be completely blocked off, and maybe that's not entirely accurate, but at the same time, a road would also be snowed over. So it makes sense that that wouldn't affect it too terribly much. I don't know, it's an interesting conundrum, because yeah, Italy would be completely blocked off. Just looking at the Italy terrain map again, yeah, mountains, 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 mountains. Then a tiny little hill right here. Very much, very defensible. Very, very defensible. I think Italy is going to be a very fun place to play, I think, is what I'm seeing here. Especially if you manage to control the mountain passes. Italy is going to be so fun to play in Project Caesar, in EU5. Will Project Caesar add similar weather effects that block an army's movement in Southeastern Asia's rainy season? They'll talk about monsoons and storms in later Tinto talk. I'm looking forward to that. Could you tell us how far it reaches the line of possible severe winter in Europe, more or less? Severe winter does sometimes happen in some climates. In some places like Arctic climate is guaranteed weeks to months of severe winter. So it basically depends on climates. Severe winter sometimes happens in, I guess, continental. Actually, let's open up this map and we can have a look here. Continental and subtropical. I imagine subtropical will not be getting any harsh winters. Continental, I definitely think, will have the ability to have various types of winter, and maybe the severest of winters will be maybe a little bit more rare. But I definitely think that's going to be a thing that we experience in Italy. Will winter reduce army movement speed and control? Control, yes, but army movement speed won't be affected, is the inference I get from this. I'm not sure I agree. I think army movement probably should be reduced quite significantly by trying to march through winter locations. I would hope that this is revisited and they both get affected. Can armies walk on frozen lakes? Yes. Finland's natural eastern borders are a risk in the winter. Then again, I'd not attempt a campaign in Finland during the winter. Yeah, no, it seems like a pretty terrible idea. Just from no personal bias at all right now. But I would argue that it's probably a bad idea to invade Finland at all at any time right now. Just probably just doesn't do it. Lives alone, really, let's be honest. Can we walk from Kamchatka to Alaska? No, that's the Bering Strait, the Bering Sea. It doesn't freeze enough, so no, you will not be able to march from Siberia to the Americas. Will ocean currents be taken into account? Will mountain ranges have an effect? Like, for example, the Alps making the Po Valley warm, or Tibet and the Himalayas ensuring northern India's fertility. That's what they have the climate classifications for. So again, if we go back to Italy, this is why this is subtropical. That's essentially the reason why it is that way. Helps that it's flatland and, you know, the river's there and everything, but climate is really the thing that is going to be impacting that. Will traversability of provinces be moddable by effects and events too, not just by winter? Currently, it's a winter code check. Modders probably can do magic, so I'm sure they can figure it out. Tunisia should have a special exception for moving through the Alps in winter. Why? Why though? Because I know what he's talking about, right? He's talking about Hannibal. He's very specifically talking about Hannibal, and Johan's trying to, you know, he's feeding into the delusion by saying extra attrition for elephants. I mean, actually, it's not exactly wrong, because when Hannibal got to the other side, I think he only had one elephant left. However, the dude set off in July. He crossed the Alps in July, and he arrived in September. Bro never went over the Alps in winter. Just saying, you're wrong. I know my shit. What happens to sea trade routes when sea tiles get frozen, or land routes when mountains get severe winters? They might get rerouted for higher costs if there is a cheaper path, but they will transfer far less goods otherwise. Awesome. So maybe trade between France and Italy, if you do not have ports to transfer that trade. If your trade is going over the mountain, it's going to get rerouted. I guess that would be a terrible. It's a terrible example, because obviously you're going to want to go from like Genoa into like Toulon. Would probably be the best trade route there. Does the game tell you ahead of time when severe winter will end, or can your armies just get killed by a thawing sea with no warning? No, but you can tell by nearby areas thawing. As long as you pay attention, of course. This is not a game where you will be so laser focused on your your buildings, that you can't possibly pay attention to your armies. I think you probably pay attention to both. Also, just don't put your army on a lake that is frozen and then just go do something else. Like, you gotta pay attention to your armies if you're gonna put them on a lake. But either way, that's cool. There's one final thing that I would like to share with you, and that is from Tinto Maps. I haven't been really doing so many of the Tinto Maps comments lately, but this one is something I did want to share with you, because people were a little bit, I wouldn't say worried, but they were wondering why there is no passage, no place to walk from Oman to Yemen. This was a big point of contention for quite a lot of people. And we have here, Oman is effectively functioned as a semi-isolated area during the period. It's not a very traversable region. We'll take an extra check after the feedback, but in principle, it is working as designed. And then next, Tinto Maps. Of course, we don't actually have a Tinto Talks for next Wednesday. Sadness. But we will have what was described as Iran and the Caucasus, but it will also be Iraq as well. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Hope you guys enjoy this information, and maybe a little bit more talking rather than just reading out the dev comments. Hope you're cool with that too. But anyway, I will be back, I guess, on Friday, unless there's something super special that I want to, I find that I want to share with you guys before then. I'll see you guys on Friday for Tinto Maps of Iraq, Iran, and the Caucasus. Should be a good one. I'll see you then. Bye-bye. I tell a lie. That's not true at all. I completely forgot. We have the Anatolia review on Monday. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Nice.